I'm Mort Cooper, your host on Change Your Voice, Change Your Life. In studio with me is my co-host, Dr. John Curtis, and he and I have come up with today's title, which is interesting because John usually has a title all by his lonesome. What's the title?
This is the bottom line at the National Institutes of Health.
What are you talking about when you mention the National Institute of Health? What does it mean to the ordinary person watching this television show? Who cares about the national?
It probably doesn't mean anything. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to tell you that all the science that is connected with health and nutrition and safety and so forth for people occurs at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda. This is the one place which is free from influence peddling, from payola, from corruption, from arm twisting, from publicly traded corporations that have a tendency to do that. The National Institutes of Health, people trust their research.
They have a budget of $28 billion now, approximately.
Yeah, and over $1 billion of that $28 billion goes to Harvard University, actually, and another billion or so goes to Johns Hopkins, which is very much connected, as you know, in the Baltimore area, which is very close to where the National Institutes of Health are. This is the interesting thing about this study. There's a researcher at the Los Angeles Times. His name is David Willman. And Willman found it fascinating that so many of these wonderful studies that come out, scientific studies, and published in the best medical journals, the most prestigious medical journals in the country, and disseminating findings that are truly breakthrough and revolutionary. He was curious as to the nature of the research that these fellows were doing. And what he found in looking at the researchers that were from the National Institutes of Health is that he found a very curious thing, is that many of these people, yes, many of them had two jobs. One was for the National Institutes of Health, and the other was for the publicly traded corporations that were sponsoring the research. And that was very disturbing to him.
Were these companies sponsoring the research, or was the research also sponsored by the NIH in conjunction with these companies, drug companies?
Well, the NIH pays the salary to these people, but they receive generous contributions from the publicly traded corporations because many of these researchers don't just receive their government salaries from the National Institutes of Health. And what's curious about that as far
as... What do they get in addition?
Well, in addition to, their six-figure and double six-figure, we're talking about sometimes $200,000 on an average.
They're getting that from the government.
From the government and their National Institutes
and then
salary.
From the drug companies.
Drug companies sometimes matching their salaries and then issuing stock options, which are very interesting. And we were talking before the show about stock options and about how the House and the Senate very prestigious committees that have to do with taxation called the House Ways and Means Committee have resisted the idea of scheduling stock options for corporations as an expense. Now, for those of you that don't know what a stock option is, it's basically a promise to pay you in stock at a future point. And the corporation's argument is that when they issue an option, they don't have to pay anything, and therefore it's not an expense, even though the person to whom it's being issued can cash out at a specific time in the future. The amount converted into stock, company fair shares of stock, and then, of course, cash out from that.
Well, Dr. Curtis, the question I'm going to ask, and ask for everybody in the audience, what's the issue involved? So they are given stock or stock options by the companies they're working for, drug companies or whatever else they're working for. What is the issue at hand?
Well, the issue
is... What David Wellman was trying to point out is the interplay of the people working for the NIH, paid by the government, us, and paid by the drug companies, and then with stock options, then have a dual loyalty.
Yeah, let me just simplify it. Let's look at, just say it this way.
Yeah,
that scientific research is supposed to be free from financial contamination from outside sources. A scientist conducts his research by stating a hypothesis. He then subjects his hypothesis to a mathematical test. If the hypothesis does not turn up, then the finding, a negative finding, is reported. what it means basically is that the scientists who are being paid and have a dual relationship cannot be objective. They are forever influenced by that pharmaceutical company who is paying them for a specific outcome.
Or maybe.
Well, I mean, it's a concern.
Yeah, it's a deep concern. So that's the issue that you
The issue is it may contaminate the objectivity of the research.
What is the answer that the top officials at the NIH have come back to answer?
Well, I'd like to, I do want to mention that because I think it's an interesting thing. When it was brought up to, his name is Elias Zerhouni. He's not somebody who works for Al-Qaeda. Zerhouni is the head of the National Institutes of Health. He had a very interesting statement. He said that his scientists who work at the National Institutes of Health have the highest level of integrity. That was his first statement. Now he's singing a little bit different tune.
I have no question about the highest level of integrity that he talks about. What's the second issue?
Well, the other issue is that he's suggesting that they cannot get the top scientists to become employed at the National Institutes of Health unless they are allowed these very lucrative consulting arrangements in addition to their government salaries. So in addition to their $200,000+ plus expense account government salaries, they then have salaries that can sometimes double and triple that amount in their consulting arrangements with these publicly traded pharmaceutical companies.
Well, you mentioned something before which is very meaningful to me and of concern. They additionally have these stock options. So they're going to do scientific analysis, but they're backed with stock options. The stock obviously goes up and down according to the market, so that if the scientists support a certain finding for a drug company, then that stock obviously or apparently or seemingly so would shoot up.
Well, I'm glad that's a very,
is that what happens?
Yes, and that's a very good observation on your part, very subtle. Just in the news just a little while ago, there was a company called Instt Systems. We all remember this company because it was, after all, Martha Stewart that sold her. She was friendly with the owner of the company. The owner of the company right now is sitting in federal prison for insider trading. He got the bad news on a tip because his brother had a contact who was also in his company of Instt Systems. About a month before the FDA was going to rule, Food and Drug Administration was going to rule unfavorably on their cancer drug, Erbitux. So before that public announcement, he decided that he was going to dump all of his shares. Well, he's sitting in prison. Of course, he tipped off Martha Stewart as well, although her conviction, I should say,
How do
is
you
about ready to
know
be.
all of these things have happened? You're talking very positively and very assuredly that this is what happened. Where did you get your information?
Well, I didn't get it from outer space.
Where did you get it?
Well, I just happen to read the Los Angeles Times and watch the news. I mean, this is all stuff that's in the news for people. It's all available. It's on the internet. You can do this isn't an endorsement, but you can Google it and just go in a search and just National Institutes of Health or whatever.
So this information that you provide...
Oh, it's all publicly... This information has been disseminated in newspapers.
It's not due to Dr. John Curtis saying this is what happened.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. Dr. John Curtis is a journalist. And
so you're getting your
columnist,
information...
and my information comes from all of the major publications that are out there that post and actually disseminate information like this. Now, what that tells you is that if a scientist is quote double dipping and they're working for the drug company at the same time from the government salary, and they obtain in their laboratory a negative result, two things can happen here basically. Either they give the negative result to the pharmaceutical company, in which case the drug, if there's a preponderance of negative results on this research, the drug will not get approved by the Food and Drug Administration. They won't believe that it's effective. The safety issue is another issue. Or the very scientist who published the negative finding on the drug will be cut off and terminated as a consultant with that pharmaceutical company. That is frequently occurring. If a negative finding is obtained then the scientist does not get a renewal on their consulting agreement with the company.
How do you know this is frequently happening?
They change consultants and researchers all the time at the National Institutes of Health. Companies go around. They even know which are the user-friendly scientists, the scientists that are more likely to kind of play ball the way the publicly traded companies want. Now, obviously, it's in the interest of the publicly traded corporation to get a positive finding. As a matter of fact, in your field of treating spasmodic dysphonia, I think it's fascinating that many of your colleagues do not report negative findings, especially about the use of Botox. I've heard only good things about Botox from the pharmaceutical company and the medical profession, statements to the effect that it's 99% effective. I don't hear anything suggesting that it's 99% ineffective, but rather only reporting on the positive findings.
Well, that's because Botox, for strangled voice spasmodic dysphonia, talking like this, is an off-label drug, and it's called an orphan drug.
Yeah.
Allergan, the maker of Botox, does not seek, from my information, direct approval from the FDA, Federal Drug Administration. They can, but they haven't. Therefore, if it's a drug, an orphan drug, or an off-label drug, the physicians are not obligated to report serious side effects. It is only when it's directly approved by the FDA, Federal Drug Administration, that the physicians are obligated to report serious side effects. So I find in reading the literature in this field with the strangled voice, or with voice problems dealt with by Botox, that I don't find serious side effects being reported. But clinically, from my experience in the office, ongoingly, I'm hearing and seeing and meeting with people who have had very bad outcomes from Botox.
Well, they have terrible reactions to the
Well, they
drug.
even call it, when I use the word bad, it's as severe, it has mild, it has negative effects where the individual loses the voice for 3 months, 6 months, 2 months, and variable periods of time, or gets no results and suffers side effects that are not reported, and some of these side effects are very serious. I am seeing it in my office, so I say that the physicians, for one reason or another, are not reporting serious side effects, whereas one of the leading physicians in the country, Dr. Gerald Burke, the chairperson of the Head and Neck Division, has, in 1999, in December, in a newsletter called the National Spasmodic Dysphonic Association, detailed the serious side effects from Botox. But I have not seen that elsewhere in the literature. I've been reading the literature extensively, so perhaps I am misreading the literature or missing what's going on in the field, because I seem to be the odd doctor out in this field reporting serious side effects from patients, emails, telephone calls, and so forth. Now, amidst all of that, there are some people who say Botox works for them, but their voice goes out for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and they get 2 weeks or a week or 3 weeks or 4 months or 3 months. And
we know Viagra works also for people. I mean, the interesting thing in your field is that when they report an outcome, like the patient got a voice improvement, their voice improved. Very seldomly, I've noticed, and maybe you can comment about this, why doesn't the doctor tell how long was the improvement for? Was it for a matter of seconds, minutes, hours, or was the improvement for days, weeks, or months?
Well,
why don't they say that when they get an outcome? Why don't they indicate how long was the improvement? Because it's not enough simply to have a, quote, improvement for a matter of minutes or hours.
Well, let me give you a case which we both know of, and it's surfacing in USA Today. We're talking about popular information by the top press and also the New York Times. We're not talking about organizations and newspapers that are
or
off
journals.
the center or out of balance. We're talking about leading newspapers. In the USA Today, there was an article about the positives of Botox for spasmodic dysphonia, strangled voices. And the quote was by a gentleman by the name of McAllister, who is the director of the National Spasmodic Dysphonic Association. That association gets generous donations of money from Allergan, the maker of Botox. But the article said, and they used the term, Botox is easing voices, these strangled voices.
Well, actually,
easing.
McAllister said that Botox is the cat's meow.
And he also said it's a godsend.
Well, what does that mean when somebody says it's the cat's meow?
This organization is a 501c.
Well, I talked with McAllister, and he directly...
A 501c means they have to
be
objective, and it's nonprofit.
It's not an advocacy group. It's supposed to be disseminating objective information. I talked with McAllister, and he indicated to me unequivocally that his organization does not endorse, support, or promote the use of any one treatment.
Do you want me to laugh now or later?
No, I mean, I'd like you to comment about McAllister making that statement.
He's a very fine gentleman. He's a very nice guy. I've spoken with him, and I've written to him asking why they don't report cures of spasmodic dysphonia, which I do for over 30 years. McAllister is not of the view that cures are applicable for the NSDA, National Spasmodic Dysphonic Association. In fact, they sent a high official from that organization to my office not too long back saying, don't report cures and we will feature you in our newsletter. But I indicated I do have cures. Why do they fear cures? Well, they also have another position. They're looking to unmask, I'm quoting, unmask the neurological condition of SD to a cure.
I'm glad you brought that up for just a second, because I would like to draw people to the attention. I don't know if we can zoom in on this here, this particular article, perhaps not. But this is a definitive study that was done in 1960 by three researchers called Robe, Brumlick, and Mort. 90 years prior to that, for 90 years, the profession of otolaryngology believed that spasmodic dysphonia, the strangled voice, was due to was due to psychiatric problems. And then in this article, these gentlemen came up with a new theory that it was due to central nervous system dysfunction. And I'm going to read you the bottom.
Were they all men in this study?
No, they weren't.
No,
they were women.
Okay.
In fact, the principal author is Evelyn Robe, two gentlemen, Joel Brumlick and Paul Moore, all of whom I believe were at the Northwestern University Medical Center. And this is their bottom line of their article, without going into the detail. Number one, spastic dysphonia, or also spasmodic dysphonia, has a neurological basis. That was their bottom line basis, that it's just due to the central nervous system dysfunction. And then two sentences later, one sentence later, it indicates, it cannot be stated, and I'm quoting, that the neurologic or encephalographic abnormalities are related to the voice disturbances as a cause and effect. It cannot be related as a cause and effect. In other words, what they're saying is that they're identifying some kind of neurological disturbance, but they can't say that it's causing spasmodic dysphonia.
What is the neurological disturbance that they're talking about? Talking about the spiking in one of the lobes of the brain.
I don't even think they're referring to the basal ganglia in this study.
No, they're talking into the brain.
And I want to point out to those who don't know that the use of encephalography was a huge fad in the early 1960s. In other words, everybody was hooking themselves up, and you know that these machines, I don't know if you remember what they look like, but they basically put a bunch of electrodes on somebody's scalp, and then they get a brainwave pattern. And they were measuring brainwaves for all kinds of things, for hypnosis, for sleep, for epilepsy, you name it, they measured the brainwaves for it.
They did it for stutters, you know.
Oh, I'm sure.
Show that stutters,
well, it was very popular.
Well, he did it for a long period of time to show that stutterers were neurologically impaired.
Yeah. Well, what they're showing, because you happen to see a printout on an electroencephalograph that shows spiking, it doesn't mean that the spiking is due to a neurological disturbance or dysfunction.
What can it be due to?
It can be due to just straining. Like, for instance, if you lean the wrong way and you begin to start shaking on your arm, you're neurologically spiking, but that doesn't mean you have a neurological disturbance.
If you were standing on one foot, this is hypothetical, and you stood on that one foot for half an hour, would you show spiking? Could you show spiking in the brain?
Absolutely. The inference that comes from electroencephalographs, you cannot take as proof that there's a permanent neurological disability that a person has, and yet the inference clearly from Rowe, Brumlick, and Mort, which really changed the entire direction of your field of treating spasmodic dysphonia, was that this is now a neurological condition.
Prior to that, it was?
It was a psychiatric disturbance.
Due to? Who made it?
This was your fella
Traub in
1871.
Called strangled voice nervous hoarseness.
Yeah.
So they switched to 1960 after 90 years, working with patients and telling them the problem was in their mind, which they couldn't find. And the literature in the psychiatric journals is filled with jargon that you could not believe, and the expressions of why these patients were talking with a strangled voice was not getting to the real cause, but they didn't know what the cause is. How many theories are there today, Dr. Curtis? Do you want me to mention them, or would you like to?
You're talking about in the field of there's
as to why strangled voice is occurring.
Look, they have theories right now that are almost extraterrestrial. They have, you've got viral theories. Did you ever hear that one? This is a virus. You catch this, it's a flu or something, and it just stays in the vocal cords. I mean, they got biochemical theories right now. I mean, molecular
Chemical
theories.
Imbalance in the brain.
Chemical imbalance in the brain.
By Christy Ludlow at the NIH.
She firmly believes that the future of the treatment of spasmodic dysphonia, is in molecular biology.
Well, there are various other theories, but there's only one problem, aside from all the theories. Folks, they don't have a single cure in the medical community since Straub first described the condition as nervous hoarseness, now known as spasmodic dysphonia, the strangled voice, for over 132 years. Not one single cure that I read about.
Do you think that that's by design? That I'm going to just ask your opinion, just to hazard this. Does the medical profession seek a cure, or do they avoid cures?
No, I think they seek a cure. I think they're desperately seeking a cure. I think they have a very simple problem, and I believe it's the paradigm. They're on the wrong road. They're looking to unmask the neurological cause today in the medical community for SD, strangled voice. It is not a neurological problem. The study by Rowe, Brumlick, and Mort in 1960 veered to the left.
To the neurological.
Yeah, to the neurological.
From the psychiatric.
From the psychiatric.
Why are you so convinced that they're looking for a cure? Because you were told that cures of spasmodic dysphonia are not appropriate for the membership of the American Hearing and Speech Association. Why do you believe that the medical profession is seeking a cure for spasmodic dysphonia? I spoke with Dr. Norman Hokikian. He
was just quoted in USA Today.
Oh, he was actually quoted in that article.
Yes.
As a matter of fact.
Yes.
And another interesting aside from that is that a patient that you and Dr. Hokikian share a patient together.
Kim Instt.
Kim Instt
who
was
on
treated
this
by
program.
both you and Dr. Hokikian.
And do you know the outcome of Botox with Kim Instt?
Well, I believe that she lost her voice.
Right. He gave her 2 Botox shots. My position is they're well-intentioned. That's what I'm saying. Dr. Curtis thinks possibly other. But the situation is that after she had 2 Botox shots, she had bowed vocal cords, from what I understand, and no voice. She worked with me for a month, came out from the Midwest, and stayed with me for a month, and was kind of skeptical about what was going on. And I don't blame her, because everything in the medical literature says there are no cures. So here's a Dr. Mort Cooper reporting ongoing cures for 30 years. He is either a crackpot or he's onto something that nobody else is onto. I'm the only one reporting cures in the world. We only have a few more minutes, so I'll sum it up. And she got 10% of her voice in the office after a month of intensive therapy. Intensive, 5.5 days, 5, 6, 7 hours a day. She went back. We corresponded by mail and by phone, and she is cured of the condition. She went back to Dr. Hokikian. He's a fine doctor, and he wanted to give her a 3rd Botox shot to treat the neurological problem, and he acknowledged to her that I had treated the functional problem and gotten her voice back, but he believes there's a substrata, the cause being neurological, but she didn't want a 3rd shot. She was perfectly happy. the point is that they are looking to a neurological base for this condition, and the Rowe, Brumlick, and Moore began it in 1960.
Well, I mean, your assumption that the medical
and Cohegan was involved in the USA story, saying how the people with spasmodic dysphonia are happy campers emotionally.
Well, he said more than that. He actually said that they're now treating, he's successfully treating abductor spasmodic dysphonia with Botox, but that's another show.
That's going to be another show.
Yeah, but let me just leave you with this. You believe that the medical profession is seeking a cure.
They're seeking a cure, a medical cure.
But I think they're seeking medical treatment, not a cure, because medical treatment is an ongoing annuity for the pharmaceutical companies for life. A cure means the pharmaceutical companies are put out of business.
That's correct. But I believe that the paradigm that they're operating from began in 1960, and it was there when Botox came to the fore with Mitchell Bryn, who was a neurologist who brought it to the fore.
Well, that was like 27 years later.
Yeah, but that's what it takes.
Yeah.
It takes years before it comes to the fore. And the position is that here is a study, and other studies have been done, and they think that the problem is a basal ganglia dysfunction. They can't find it, that it's a molecular biological problem. They can't find it, that it is a chemical imbalance in the brain, that it's reflux acid causing it, and so forth and so on. But they don't report one single cure in over 132 years. That is what I'm getting to, and the patients are not given choice to decide they want non-medical treatment rather than medical care that has no cure, and non-medical, called direct voice rehabilitation, what I'm doing, has ongoing cures for 30 years. So there's an issue at stake here. But I'm saying that they do have a paradigm, and that paradigm is leading them to believe it must be a neurological problem, must be a medical problem, it must be a dystonia, but I don't find it so.
Yeah, and of course when Kim Engstrom came back to Dr. Hokegian, he still wanted to inject her with the third shot, even though her voice was entirely normal. That sort of tells the whole story. The bottom line at the National Institutes of Health, you make the call.
Thank you. Good night.